I'm really pleased to introduce this conversation between Pastor Jeff Bowman of the Temple United Methodist Church down in the Heights and myself, a conversation that I've been looking forward to for a long time, and it went on so long when we recorded it that I have to split it into two pieces, so it may end in a funny place, but I hope you'll pay attention because there is so much to learn here. Jeff is an aficionado, a student of Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan, a teacher of spirituality, who works with a lot of other writers and thinkers about spirituality, spiritual life, mysticism, and shares a daily devotion that you can sign up for free. I'm going to put that address right there, and I hope you'll connect to Richard Rohr if that's a flavor of Christianity that works for you. I want you to understand, I understand, that we all approach our faith differently. We all have different stories, and along the way we pick up different words, we speak different ways, but I hope that you will find here the opportunity to listen in for what God has to say to you in our conversation about letting go. A long time ago, I met Reverend Jeff Bowman when we were both moving toward our first appointment as pastors. And that was a great time. And then I find him years and years later here he's in the Heights and I'm in North Muskegon, and we are neighbors again. And in the meantime, I don't know if it was true when we started, Jeff. In the meantime, you have become so focused on spiritual life, mysticism within Christianity, and you are become a guru in our midst, which I appreciate, and I'm glad to connect with you again. So we're starting off Lent, wanting to think about some ideas about what it would mean for us spiritually to step forward to whatever is the next level for all of us. And I'm calling this series Letting Go because stepping forth seems to be leaving things behind. So tell me briefly how you got into paying attention to Richard Rohr and studying with him, and what this has meant in your life.
I appreciate that, Jeremy. This is kind of relevant to our conversation of how we met, as hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about some of the things that I've come to understand as a universal pattern in the world of order, disorder, reorder, that even in our own lives we met. We had these great conversations, and I think it was Albion College at annual conferences. And then we disappeared off each other's radar for a long time, until we got to, annual conference occasionally. But then here we are again, and even having kind of these deep conversations together. So I kind of appreciate that it plays right into what we're going to talk about, I think. I began to lose myself as spiritually. I was broken, was feeling like I was doing everything that I was supposed to do as a pastor, but spiritually bankrupt. And I was appointed here to Muskegon Heights at Temple, and there was a gentleman in the congregation named Frank Nagy, who, as soon as I arrived and heard where I come from and what I had been through, said, as the pastor here, first and foremost, Frank was on the SBRC, I want you to do something for yourself. And he was a Dominican associate down at Marywood.
Oh,
And
wow.
immediately he got me connected to Dominican spirituality, a study of that for my own self. We joined kind of a local Dominican group. I'm still a part of it over here with the ladies. I'm the only man left because Frank's gone now.
Mm.
But that's how I got introduced to Roar, and it just began to resonate with me. This kind of the mystery of God, the suffering that I had been through. What do I do with this suffering? And I was in a terrible rut of wanting to blame other people for why I was suffering.
Yeah.
That I wanted to transmit all that. You are the ones who made me suffer. And I'm glad I'm gone from there. But yet I was still suffering. My entrance into Roar helped me begin to understand my own suffering as a way of getting to God. Kind of the apophatic descent and say, you know, everybody's going to suffer. It's what you do with that suffering, and you're transmitting it. Is there a healthier way to understand that? And then my whole life, all the suffering of my life, and had a pretty dysfunctional family. I began to be able to get some peace around that. Once I was not trying to, they talk about letting go, of not letting go of my suffering, but be willing to sit with my suffering and allow what I learned from that suffering to transform me spiritually.
Wow. So thank you for sharing the narrative that brings you here. And maybe there's someone who is listening who can share some of that story themselves. And I wonder if, me as a pastor, I'm thinking there's a lot of people right now with COVID who are suffering in one way or another, who are full of stress, who are feeling a deep disorientation. They're feeling off balance and disconnected. And I keep thinking this has got to be a spiritual opportunity for us to refocus, to reinvent, and to discover what matters and what doesn't in some different ways. So you've been going through this narrative of your own, discovering where God is in your, you know, where the light in you is connecting, holding on to and growing into your weakness, and that's, I think, a great opportunity for inspiring folks. What's your thought about folks in COVID world right now and letting go?
We have a tendency in our sufferings to see ourselves as the victim. And this isn't supposed to happen to us, or why is my life, or you know what this suffering has caused me, whether it be economical stress or time with my yoga group or whatever it might be. We take this victimized kind of persona that look what COVID has done to me. Instead of allowing the suffering that is caused by this pandemic to sit with that suffering and to ponder that suffering about what is this suffering revealing in me? What is really coming to death in me?
Victimhood is an ego-centeredness, isn't it?
Absolutely. I did it myself. I still do it.
Yeah. Oh, I know I have,
It's
and
my
I.
natural, my natural default when suffering comes. It's kind of like early childhood development. You develop behaviors, some for good reason, to protect yourself. If you have a parent who is abusing you, you have to develop behaviors and things that will take you out of that. Uh, but in the same sense, our sufferings come up on us, emotional, whatever, and we still try to use those same defense tactics, uh, blaming people, or sometimes physical addictions. Um,
Mhm.
Great Depression. Not that depression's wrong, but pretty soon we use depression as our defense.
Mm. I'm too down to do anything about that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
too, I'm declaring myself unable to step into life.
Yeah.
Um, we were talking about scripture. We were talking about Matthew 16, and it is, as you talk about suffering. I'm going to start at verse 21, which was kind of early in what we were talking about, of Matthew chapter 16. Goes like this: From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. So here's Jesus, our great spiritual teacher, just telling them all, hey, suffering's coming. Suffering for me is real, is coming. It's the way it is, unavoidable. And he approaches it, it sounds like, with this matter of fact, okay, I just need you to know that suffering is coming, suffering is real, and suffering is coming for me. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, as if to say to him, you're not allowed to suffer. You're supposed to be strength. And somehow the fact that you are supposed to be a Messiah, the king, you're supposed to be God on earth, all the things that we could call Jesus, somehow should exempt you from suffering. But God on earth suffers, makes suffering part of life. So Peter took him aside, began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you. As if somehow we should protect Jesus from suffering, as if that would somehow mean that we had a Savior who never had a hard day. But he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. What does that mean to you, to set our minds on divine things? That's you.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. A couple different ways, but my first reaction is, I think you already said it. That divine things, the idea, well, and we look at a crucified Savior, that the divine things would be to be able to accept your suffering. You're not being signaled out, you're not being punished, you're not being targeted, but to accept the suffering, because as God is going to reveal in me, God is suffering. It is part of that suffering out of which death comes and new life. And you said it so well that sometimes, even in my own ministry, I think I fall into a pattern where, like Peter, I want to defend the suffering of others rather than to enter their suffering in solidarity with them. I don't have your problems, and I'm going to defend you and all that you're going through.
I'm going to fix you. I'm going to be your Messiah.
Exactly. And Peter's trying that, But Jesus is saying, I don't need you to fix me. And if you follow me, you're going to learn that suffering is part of this way.
The second part of the reading starts at verse 24. Then Jesus told his disciples, you know, I imagine that confrontation with Peter was held with all the other disciples around. Jesus has been telling them, I got to suffer. To Peter's like, ooh, no.
Exactly.
And he gets told off right in front of the class, which is a little shaming for Peter. And now and then Jesus turns and looks at everyone else who's around him. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. And that is so profoundly troubling. I mean, we tend to think that habitually with that, when we don't reflect on it, we think that somehow being a Christian is supposed to make my life nicer. It's supposed to make my life smoother, easier, make it make more sense, make me happier. And yet the path to happy, I don't know if happy is even something we need to talk about, but he's saying, oh, heck no. You want to follow me? And at this moment, I assume everyone starts asking themselves, maybe I don't want to follow you. Maybe this is just bad news. Or maybe I need to examine my whole faith and say, have I taken this seriously? And do I want to take this seriously? And I guess for anybody in church, if you're feeling like I don't want to suffer, well, no, we don't have to want to suffer. Suffering will come. I guess the question is, am I going to allow that to be part of my story and part of me, or am I going to spend my life trying to avoid it, pretend my way out of it? I don't know. Let them deny themselves and take up the cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? And that verse 25, those who want to save their life will lose it. It gives us a feeling of danger, that we are in a very precarious situation with regard to reality and regard to life. And we have been doing all the wrong things, trying to protect it. And instead, we need to be throwing it out there on the line somehow more.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like I said, a lot of times we're not even aware of, and I think that's part of that letting go for me, where the practice of centering prayer has allowed me to still be in my body, but to be able to observe my programs that I run every single day. And those who want to save them, like I'm always trying to save my life. If I have a disagreement with my wife, I'm oblivious to her suffering because I'm too busy trying to save face in this argument.
Yeah,
I can't drop below the surface and even empathize or see her because my ego is so intact. I'm right, and I'm not going to surrender. I'm not going to give in. I'm going to save, because suddenly if I had to admit I'm wrong or become vulnerable, somehow that's a weakness on me.
So one
it's
of
like
the
the little
things,
ego says in my ear, Jeff, you just apologized for something you didn't do. But the greater thing than me being right was the love that was standing in front of me. And was I willing to suffer for that love? Yeah.
Well, maybe I make myself suffer because of my own incredibly fragile ego, because I'm trying to protect myself, defend myself from hurt, from damage,
Right.
from being devalued or shamed. Because I'm trying to hold on to my honor, whatever that's worth, I have to knock other people down.
Right.
So I have to
Right.
let go of my own desperate clinging to ego here, and the desperate idea that I have to be right at the end of the day.
Gosh, you're so rare. I mean, you just did a synopsis of the Passion Week. Those are all the things that we watch play out in this Christ. The betrayal, the dragging, the humiliation, the mocking, all the things that we're trying to save ourselves from. Um, and I think, because, I've come to understand this kind of as, and not real well. I don't think anyone can understand the mystics. It's more about just receiving what's being revealed through their wisdom. Was that in this letting go, Jesus is saying, do you want to try to save all of this and lose your soul? Because all the stuff that you're hanging on to and saving is
Dragging
not
you.
who you really are. You'll miss your soul. You won't be in touch with who you really. And I'm going to show you who God is by giving my life. I'm going to demonstrate this to you. That at the heart of God, at the core of the Imago Dei of who you are, suffering is a part of that. It's not the end of the story. It's where new life begins. But so often we have such a problem celebrating the tiny deaths, the deaths that come through us daily, of memorializing them, acknowledging them, the pain and the sorrow that goes with them, and then saying, because out of acknowledging that and receiving it, it's almost like we receive death into us to the point that we begin from the soul to understand deathlessness.
Okay, now you start stretching our, I think our ability to sort of leap into it, and we go, that's more, more than I can handle.
Yeah. Let me just say, let me put it in Jesus's way. He's saying, I'm going to go to Jerusalem 3 days. I'm going to die.
Yeah.
He's already accepted death as part of his divine life, of who he is in God. And
Yeah.
that's not the end of story. And he keeps telling about, in 3 days, I'm going to rise from the grave. Nobody can get that.
No.
Then in our times, we give testimonies to, we've been forced to hang on to death. We lost a child, never thought we'd find our way back. And some years later, we've never let go of the pain. But somehow we said something good came out of that. Because that parent never, until they let go and became vulnerable and held the suffering of the loss of their own child, could never heal and move on. Those who lose their life, the death of your child, you said, it's going to be the death of me.
Yeah.
And your ego jumped in and said, no, don't let it hurt you that bad. Don't let it kill you. But once you experienced the reality of that pain and suffering as if a death to yourself, it transformed, whether it be 3 days or 3 years, and became something new again.
So the whole spiritual walk, journey, whatever, does seem to be a constant dying to self. Does seem to be a constant process of letting go, of realizing that the things we clung to so hard are not ultimately the things we have to hang on to at the end. We become actually people trying to imitate Christ. We become people actually more interested in living Christ's life on earth than living our life on earth.